All right. This is the March 20th, 2025 Helm Dev meeting. Um, Follow the CNCF Code of Conduct, and these are recorded, so everyone be aware when we're saying things. Okay, so I'll drop the notes link in for anyone who might someday watch the recording. And yeah, okay, so we don't have any announcements for today. Um, as far as I know. Nothing listed.
I feel like we could do a Karen would normally have a sign up for maintainer booth thing
Yeah,
at KubeCon if she was here.
that's true. And I think there's
I
only
haven't looked at the
I
sheet.
as maintainers on right now, and we both have signed up. So I think we're good there. I guess just the only announcement is that, KubeCon's coming. We'll have another Helm Dev call before then, but if anyone's going to be there, there are a number of talks. So, check the schedule and we can give more detailed info on the next one. Um,
Scott, were you able to find out if I can get some of the contributors stay or anything?
I haven't.
You reach out to- Okay.
So this is your reminder to me, I guess. Yeah, no, they didn't get back to me. Yeah, so
Okay,
GP didn't get back to me yet, so I will ping other CNCF event staff.
great, thank you.
Yeah, that would be good. Um, okay. Uh, well, so far the only discussion items that we have are yours, Ingy. So
I think Karen has an announcement, eh? She just,
I think
I just stuck that in for
oh, I see, that's from George
yeah.
saying, being Karen, I got it, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have liked to had this discussion with Farina here and stuff like that because, but I'll,
Yes.
I'll give it, I, I, I I wrote down all the points that I wanted to make, and I was going to preface it with Scott, don't, and George, don't cut me off until I get to the end, because you'd be like, oh, but I don't know, because it's your guys' puppy. So
I read it, but yeah, you definitely go. You have the platform. Go ahead.
okay, let me go. So yeah, the plugin system for Helm 4 that's kind of I think it's the shining star of the thing. So I think we really need to do it, but it does have a lot of worries and a lot of unknowns. We just don't know how it's going to work. So we need actually testing from major users and that kind of thing. And I think Scott even brought up there's concerns around, I think it was from Flux, would WASM actually scale to their needs? So yeah, and we don't have, as Matt consistently points out, we don't have a lot of time to get all that done. And it could be too much, but I had an idea, and the idea was to focus on a minimal release that let a plugin system work and make it completely optional in Helm 4. So anything that the idea would be that anything that was core that we wanted to make into a plugin, which has advantages, that we make it dual-lifed until it's proven to be solid enough. So like the rendering engine or something like that. Any big part of Go thing that can be pulled into a package, and I don't know the structure well enough of what's already in packages and whatnot, but if we could make it so that something was both a plugin and a core piece, and then the advantages would be that now people can fork those plugins into new plugins if they want, or that they can more easily target PRs against the plugin, I would think. And then as those plugins become more perfect, then we could have the idea that, oh, we don't need this in core anymore, and we can just make it take out the dual life. And so what I think that would do is we get it out there, and like there's going to be beta testers before release, but a lot more people after release. And we make the big announcement. They're going to be using these new plugins, and then they don't have to worry. Nothing's ever going to break on their systems. And if they have problems with plugins, Flux can try out things and like, oh yeah, WASM's fine, or like, oh no, it's actually has these problems, then we can address them. And so it just kind of lets, just getting to a minimal point gives us a timeline that we can actually achieve in 6 months or 5 months or whatever it is now. You know, and then let the world be testing it for us. You know, we'll test what we can, but we don't even have time to test all that stuff. And yeah, and then I think that's pretty much where I was going. So did anybody, what do people think of that? If we want to have a discussion.
Well, my immediate thought about that is that I think yeah, that makes a lot of sense on some level or on in different levels. The
Yeah.
one area where it does not I don't see that as being a solution to this is the chart defined plugins piece. So
Give an example there.
well, for example, if you want to write a chart in YAML script,
Yep.
If the if you have a chart like such a chart that has
Yeah.
a render engine that's not built into Helm core or like Q or something like this, like Timoni chart or Timoni package it or bundles or whatever. If you wanted a chart written in QLang or some other language that it's not built into Helm core, what you're proposing doesn't really solve for that.
I think it does. And I
It
could
doesn't
explain
solve for
how.
that
So like,
it wouldn't solve for that for the yes, it would in terms of like you have an optional alternative, but that it's the chart defined plugins part that really I think needs a we're deciding to do this or not. Because if you have a chart that defines this, if you your user experience, if we don't have tools built in to handle downloading these things, then you have to do it all manually yourself in order to make use of it, which brings the user experience way down. It means that you have to manually install your own plugin in order to
well, I mean, from my standpoint, from my thinking is that like, and maybe I totally misunderstand it, but like, I would imagine a chart would list its plugins probably in the chart.yaml file. I would imagine, yeah.
Yeah, that's what's in
And
here.
that plugin would know. I mean, so we would have a simple install for it would just point to this is where the plugin lives, and then it just does its thing to install it. And then that plugin, part of its job is to install the things that it needs, right? It's a plugin. So once it gets on disk or in place and has its entry point called, then it can really take over, right? I mean, the chart is chosen to do that, and I think you're all good. So
Yeah,
I don't.
I mean that's what's in the hip now. But I think what you're proposing is something like to do this a bit differently, right? You're proposing to not move functionality into plugins, or rather,
I just say don't make any bit of the system dependent on the new plugin system. Yeah, you know, just have the how you configure it, how things get installed, and then we don't like even have to move any core functionality out before release. But then we can, you know, we can like if we don't have the time to do it, then we don't have the time to do it. But then if we have the system, then we could leave like some core piece of Helm, we pull it out, make it a package, make it so it works both as a plugin and as core. And then, yeah, that's the idea. I don't know. You know, and Scott, we work together a bunch, so we can, and I know that you want to make the Wise plugin, you know, as a exemplar plugin. So I think that we can get further on this and see if I'm full of it or
just to be clear, the main
yeah.
suggestion that you're making is that as an initial go, keep those packages available outside of plugins, but load them through plugins so that if we find problems, we can kind of like, we won't, like for one, SDK users wouldn't have to use plugins, is what I'm hearing for that. and two,
Right.
they wouldn't.
I think the most important tenet is that nobody has to use any plugin at all, period, because we
Again,
can't
unless
tell what it's going to break.
unless
So
those
I would
SDK sorry, just to be
I
clear,
would
unless those
phrase
SDK users want to render a chart with something that you need a plugin for, like you said, like YAML script, right? Then those SDK users would have to use that unless they don't want to support those charts.
I guess we can take this offline, but I just thought that like a chart would declare that plugin, and then that would get, so it would be that the chart has made the decision, I want this plugin, and we have the plugin system in Helm 4 that does the install and calls the entry point. So I don't know about the SDK details that I'm not familiar, so we can maybe talk about that later. And George, you're
I was gonna say, I would
chomping at
phrase
the bit.
the
Yeah.
the proposal slightly differently. I would say, basically, support plugins, if I understand correctly, except if there's no plugins defined for, say, a getter, then just fall back to the default Go code. It is completely correct that we can't fall back to the default Go code if it's a YAML script chart, because there is no default Go code for YAML script. So this proposal becomes is potentially fine for August or November. In fact, I have no. I mean, it was going to be a kind of a bit of a pain to get plugins into embed and all that stuff. If we can just skip that, and do it later, sure, why not? But yeah, at some point, SDK users can't just say I don't want plugins, because what they're effectively saying is I can't support charts which require plugins. So,
Exactly.
but we can make that their problem rather than our problem. If they don't want to support plugins, then they can't support charts in a certain sense.
Like if we're going to make a plugin system, what would be the minimum that we would need for Helm 4 release? To not have to wait till Helm 5 to do it, right? Or, it's like, what would be the minimum that we could actually delay the work until after Helm 4 release?
Well, the minimum right now, in order to
Uh-huh.
actually get this in, would be to not have chart defined plugins in the new chart API v3. That would be the minimum, and then we would continue the same proposal to basically move the existing plugin system to something more secure like WASM, because it really only does affect CLI users for one, and also to move post renderers into a plugin, which it really, frankly, should have been in the first place. And we just would use WASM for that. SDK users, yeah, we could continue to keep the post renderer. We could say, I mean, right now, SDK users who are security minded, like Flux, don't support just arbitrary binaries for a post renderer anyway.
Yeah.
They use the SDK and they just support a specific post renderer. In this case, it's customized, and then you could add more. So this wouldn't really affect them, honestly. And they don't use CLI plugins because they're not using the CLI. So that really wouldn't affect them at all. It just means that, like, then what this would mean is that in order to support charts that are rendered with something besides Go template, for the meantime, until that happens, it would have to be added to Helm core.
Okay, let's discuss. I want to relinquish the time and the.
Yeah, but I mean that's the high level of what
Okay.
like, if you look at the HIP again and think that part through, that's the thing to consider, is that I mean, I still don't think it's untenable to do what we're
Okay.
proposing, but you just have to kind of like look at those as trade-offs if that's the way. It's more of a timeline
Cool.
thing.
All right. Great.
Bessie had mentioned, let's see, there's a couple of comments in the.
Yeah, I just wrote that I have a plugin that I use for Helm v3 that if we need more examples to test against for v4, I can try that.
Okay. Oh yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah, actually, we'd really appreciate. I mean, it's not quite ready for that, but it would be really nice for early people to test against, like the unfinished system.
Definitely, and this the plugin that I have doesn't make use of a lot of what the plugin system offers, so I think it could be a good first step.
Hmm. Yeah, Raphael, that's a good question. So you mentioned about, I think, Raphael, you had 2 points. One was about plugins needing to manage their own dependencies, um, and uh, and also like defining a mandatory interface for plugins. I think that is what we were
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Ultimately, I think like if just given the timeline, and we'll have to wait for other, I mean, specifically for Matt Farina to be here, just because he is the release engineer for Helm 4. And if you look at the Helm 4 development hip, the development process hip for Helm 4, the release engineer has a special role in like really deciding on things like timelines and like feasibility of things that could meet those timelines. So so he does actually currently have a special like place for deciding these things for Helm 4. So of course we'll need to like have him say.
Yeah.
But
To be honest, I wasn't even tracking Helm 4 at all. First person
yeah.
that talked to me about M4 was Zingy this week. And
Got it.
I'm just
Okay.
a heavy user of Helm 3 at the moment.
Yeah, and I mean, no one's using Helm 4 yet because it doesn't even
Yeah,
exist.
obviously.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
but not familiar with the roadmap or how things are currently standing.
what we really need ultimately is we do actually need our um the current Helm improvement proposals to be commented on by people. Not just that one, not just the plugin one, but the others too. And to give feedback on them, and those will then need folks to help implement them and or test them. So that's what we really need for Helm 4 on the whole, beyond the topic that Ingi mentioned. Yeah.
I dropped another note in that hip this morning about the we were like worried about the signing system or how the verification system of plugins, and a security guy, a friend, turned me on to kind of the latest cool way to do really secure signing with where you can have you can have multiple people sign anything really simply, and then you can have people, the consumer can set the signature requirements. So it kind of gets us out of the thing of like, who is responsible for signing and all that kind of thing. It gives us more flexibility there. Anyway, something to look into.
Cool.
And the other question I'll put off for next week. So.
You want to do your other question next week?
Well,
because
I guess
this
there's
is
not a lot
your
of
agenda
stuff.
item now, unless someone has an agenda item here that they didn't write yet.
Yeah. I kind of need Farina here for this, because I was just wondering, we talked about it, Scott, but I was just wondering, like, the post renderer, like I figured out a way to get at the post renderer command by taking the process ID, finding its parent ID, and then you could actually, from the system, get the original commands that invoked it, which was, kind of a hacky backdoor way of getting information. But basically, a post renderer only gets standard in. But it would be really useful for certain situations to be able to see other files in the chart that don't come through the files built in. And like the values YAML file, for example, you could do a lot of interesting stuff if you had access to that, but you don't know where it is. It might not be on disk, whatever. But if you had the original command, you could find it. So I was just wondering if it was like, if people made the decision to not supply any information in environment variables or arguments or anything like that. If it was like made to be super sandboxed of only standard in and standard out, or if that was just like just the way it ended up in Helm 3. But that's something maybe Farina would know more.
No, I mean, you messaged both of us and I replied there.
Yeah.
It was not there was not a decision to not add. Basically, I believe it. So the people, the Helm maintainers who actually added the post renderer in Helm 3, it filled a need, and it was one of the fastest ways to do it.
Yeah.
At that time, given what folks thought. And really, it was just intended to be literally because it's a post renderer. All you really get is the rendered YAML, and you give back what you want to change, and that is it. So it didn't give any context, not because there's any security reason not to do it, but just because it wasn't a requirement for what folks needed.
Okay, then I think I'll put in a HIP about possible environment stuff that could be
Yeah.
passed along to a post renderer. And then I just wanted to make sure that wasn't, something that had already been decided. No way. So
No,
thank
it
you.
hasn't. It hasn't. And the HIP should, the way to get all of that at this point would be to make it a plugin type. Kind of like how there's only one special plugin type now besides the generic one, which is the downloader type. It would become a post renderer plugin type because plugins get all of that. They get those environment variables, and they get all the commands.
I'll ask you for a URL and what you mean by plugin type later. If you can give me one here, that might be
So
useful.
I would echo what Scott's saying. I don't think today we really want to try and extend post renderer to be a renderer. I think we just want to make it available to render charts with YAML script. Because what you're doing with the post renderer is really trying to render the chart.
Yeah.
So it's and this is an explicit goal of plugins. Probably everybody's sick about hearing about plugins by now, but it is to make it so that you can just get the values YAML or values the users provided. You can get the charts, and the files could be called they wouldn't be called templates anymore because they wouldn't be templates. They'd just be YAML script files, and the rendering engine would just spit out Kubernetes manifests. And
to be specific, I mean, yeah, I do a lot in YAML script, but it's not only about that. I mean, I would make it general, so it's like, it's just playing around in post renderers. When you play around with something a lot, you're like, oh, why can't it do this? So more like, regardless of what the actual task I was doing. So anyway, yeah, I can also leave it alone. I think maybe it makes sense to just leave the post renderer as it is.
Well,
Are we
I
thinking of?
I just added some links.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So there we go. That's what I meant. Those are the links to the current docs and like what you get with plugins and what I meant by a special downloader plugin type.
Thank you.
Who's not familiar with this can like familiarize themselves and
yeah, I'm not even yet familiar with the SDK, and so what you mean by that and all that stuff. So
yeah, and
I will become familiar with it.
Yeah, you can like familiarize yourself with the SDK here.
Okay.
George actually wrote a more robust set of examples that's linked there. For anyone who wants to play around, and that project is actually it's a working Go project that's inside of the docs. Yeah,
Okay.
in the Helm --GitHub repo where the docs live. So you can actually like download it right from there and play around with it too.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Ingi. So we have a couple of those are great topics, really, and we're going to actually like meet and work on resolving some of the open questions in that one HIP. So today. Yeah. So given that we have 2+ minutes left, who do we have someone who would like to be? I guess it's only me and George on the call right now, but do you have someone else who would like to be moderator for next week?
I can moderate next week. I haven't done it for a while.
All right. Anybody want to help take notes? Notes don't have to be a maintainer.
I think I have a doctor's appointment next week. Sorry.
That's okay. No, it's okay. I'll go ahead and do that, and we can for now, and we can have other people do it too. And now for
I'm signing you up to take notes because now that you've given me permission to do stuff in there.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, that's great.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so
that makes sense.
for issue triage and PR review, who would like to help with that this week? I'm putting myself down for the PR review. Anybody able to help with that?
I can do both.
Okay.
Scott, you said you had a meeting later today on the plugin system. What was that about?
We're just, it's something that George and I
I mean,
mean,
oh, you and George. Okay.
work on just to like resolve the hip. We've also been doing things like proofs of concept and doing like memory profiling and connecting with the maintainers of the WASM system that we're looking at and
Okay.
and things like that. Just a variety of those kinds of things to like get stuff in line. But there's open questions on the PR, so including yours. So that's what
If you don't mind me lurking, yeah, ping me. But I could just sit in the background. I have a lot of meetings today, so I might be double booked. But let me know if you want.
Cool. Okay.
Okay.
I have a quick one. Hi, everyone. This is Augie Yago. Scott, in the chat window, I've posted a link to a Google Docs document, which is the input from Ericsson concerning how they fared with Helm in their NFIO POC. You may find that quite interesting because they have quite a few details about how they think a Helm should behave in that environment.
Great.
Nice.
And if you think that having access to an empty umbrella Helm chart that Ericsson is using for their 5G solution, let me know, because this is not currently included in what I've just posted.
Yeah, that would be helpful. I remember the thank you from the previous week's meeting. Thank you. That's
Is that something open that you can post now or no?
No,
The docs
it's
in the
in the
Zoom
chat
chat.
window of this meeting, so
Oh,
everybody should see
I
it.
got that part. You said there was another thing that, an umbrella chart or something like that.
Oh, yeah, that was something that Scott had asked for, but
Okay.
my liaison at Ericsson did not come through with an empty Helm chart, as we called it, empty umbrella Helm chart, because clearly they don't want to share their code with an open source development group, but they would be amenable to provide what is called an empty chart that gives you the hierarchy of what they're using in their umbrella Helm charts. In fact, I thought that something like this would have been included in their write-up that they submitted to the NFIO team, but I didn't find anything. So I'm going to go back and specifically ask for an empty umbrella Helm chart.
great. Thank you. Yes, that's awesome. Okay. Appreciate that. I put that in the notes. Okay, and then I think we've already said that me and George can be present next week, and so I think we're pretty set with that. Yeah, because it's 2 minutes after now, I'm gonna close it down. But thanks for noting that, Augie. And yeah, we'll put the notes just so everyone knows. We'll put the agenda. I'll put it up now for next week, and you can feel free to use this exact same link to put your discussion items on in advance if you want, or anytime between now and then. So thank you all, and we'll see you on Kubernetes Slack, and see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Have fun, everyone.
Have
Goodbye.
a good one.